help but wonder where I'm bound, where I'm bound. Can't help but wonder where I'm bound.
All right, everyone, welcome back to What's the Rush podcast with me, Rebecca Rusch. I am your teammate on this grand adventure, and we are joined today by my good friend and world champion Olympic mountain biker, Kate Courtney. And the world knows Kate for podiums and historic wins on the world's biggest stage over the past decade. And I have to say, her performances on the mountain bike race course have inspired the next generation of riders and forced a seismic shift in US mountain biking participation and the level of performance. More than the wins is how she shows up to do her craft that really resonates with me and with the world. She shows up with joy and honesty and sparkle and integrity and ingenuity. And we all know that behind every champion's armor and accolades, there's always more to the story. And Kate is, of course, one of the best in the world as a professional athlete, but she's also a world-class entrepreneur and a very intuitive visionary and also a brilliant writer. With the creation of She Sends Foundation and the newly formed, really uniquely structured race team, She Sends, Kate is redefining the business of sports with the mission of being her best as an athlete and empowering others to grow through cycling at the same time. Kate, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, and thank you for that intro. That's very humbling, and I really appreciate being on here with you.
Well, we've known each other a while as former Red Bull teammates, and I had the pleasure of, you know, playing a very small part of giving you your first Red Bull helmet when you were really coming onto the scene in elite racing. And it's just been such a fun journey to be on with you as you move through these chapters of your career. So I there has been so much documented about your professional path and your journey into mountain biking. So I don't want to go too deep into that, but because I will refer people to, there's two great podcasts, Rich Roll this year and also Second Nature with Aaron Lucy, that do a really good job of outlining all of your chapters. But I kind of want to get into the current chapter. So just for those of us listening, can you take us, just to set the stage, a really quick lap kind of through just the timeline of your progression into the professional mountain biking scene, and then we'll get right into the present.
Absolutely. So I grew up in Marin County, California, where mountain biking was famously first explored in the 60s and 70s. And I grew up riding, doing a lot of different sports. I ski raced, I ran, I rode horses, I did gymnastics. And it wasn't until high school that I really discovered this love for endurance sport and for the bike. And I actually started racing through the NorCal League, which was one of the first of NICA's high school racing leagues, where I was the only girl on the team. And I raced my first race freshman year and really fell in love with it. And from there, it kind of became an obsession. And I think I was a little bit blessed that I didn't necessarily know much about the sport going in. So I really was able to take it one step at a time. I started racing in the freshman category, then JV, then varsity. Then I had the opportunity to race some junior World Cups. I raced on the national level first. Then I raced some junior World Cups. Then I had the opportunity to race for a pro team and work my way up through the U23 ranks while I was in college. And my career really shifted to being a full-time professional athlete after graduating and in 2018 when I won the world championships. So from then on, it's been full gas professional racing. I won 5 World Cups and a World Cup overall title in 2019, went to the Olympics in Tokyo, and have been pursuing that specific category of racing ever since.
Yeah, and I mean, you just explained it all, 10 years of racing in 60 seconds
In
or less.
60 seconds, yeah.
Good job. What's really cool is obviously the Tour de France Femme avec Zwift just finished up the women's tour, and holy cow, like I think about when you started racing, when I started racing, women's sports looks a lot different right now, and especially women's cycling. So, I mean, I know you've been watching and
Oh, yeah.
but it's not just cycling. So I do want to kind of give you props for being in a being the first, not the first, but being the first in a very long time of American mountain bike racers who really made an impact on the world stage. And there was a big gap, between a lot of the elite racing on the US side. And it really seems like now you watch the races and the US men's and women, especially women, they're all up in there. They're including you. And that's a big shift. What do you think that shift of the level of competition, especially in mountain biking, and the level of participation, which is just as important to me, and I know you, as the level of competition, what do you think that shift is coming from?
Yeah, it's definitely an incredible moment in women's sports, not just in women's cycling, but across the board as kind of the economy around women's sports changes and with it, the opportunities for
Yeah.
those athletes within them. But I think with mountain biking, as I'm sure is the case with other sports, but mountain biking is what I know, it's something that I think happened really slowly and then all at once. And there were so many women that I looked up to who fought for equal prize money, fought for women racing on the same courses as the men, fought for the way that we were portrayed in the media. And those things accumulated over time. And while I didn't necessarily have someone that was like a year older or 2 years older that was paving this path that I could really see, I did have mentors in the sport that um, really paved the way for me and encouraged me to dream these big dreams. And I would say two of the biggest ones were Leah Davison, who was one of my teammates for 6 years on Specialized. We actually shared a room for most of my years as a U23, which to me at the time felt totally normal. But now, as a woman in her 30s, realizing that, like, she suddenly got roomed with this like 18-year-old kid who was trying to figure out World Cup mountain biking, like, that could have been um yeah, that she took that as an opportunity to really take me under her wing and make racing fun and model what it looked like to be a hardworking professional athlete and to notch these really big results. We were rooming together when she was silver at the World Championships. I also was definitely inspired early on by Georgia Gould, who actually in my first year racing, and I've told this story a few times, but in my very first year racing World Cups, I qualified for the World Championships. I ended up flying over to Austria. First day of practice, I get a concussion, don't end up finishing the race. But as I'm standing there, kind of feeling sad for myself and watching the elite women's race, Georgia Gould won a bronze medal in that event. And they played Born in the USA as she crossed the finish line. And I just like remember that being the coolest moment ever to be in Austria, to see someone from your own country have this moment. It was also an Olympic year. So knowing that these women were competing for that honor as well, like that, those experiences were really, really formative to me. And I think hopefully I've been a small part of paying that forward to the next generation. And I think part of why we're seeing such a big expansion right now is that the bottom of the funnel has expanded. So there's just a way bigger audience of young athletes who can see, oh, wow, like there is a pathway in this sport. I can dream these big dreams and pursue them and potentially achieve them. And with NICA and so many kids getting exposed to cycling, there's just a much bigger audience for this message and a much bigger pool of athletes who may want to make a go at it.
You make a good point that the progress in women's sports right now feels like, bam, it's all on the stage with the Olympics, with, soccer, with, basketball, with cycling. But it has been decades in the making of people really sacrificing and being the only one lining up,
Yeah.
um, and it takes a long time progress. Often you probably got that. You're like, oh, you just came right on the scene and you won your first, world championships, and you just came on like that. But you've been like working towards that for quite a long time, and it was a fast rise for you. But like anything, it takes so much work, and all the women that came before. But yeah, it is exciting about you are playing a really big impact
Thank you.
in the US. And like I said in the intro, because you show up in a way that is sparkly, that is joyful, that is fun, that is obviously you take your sport seriously, but you show up in a way that purely shows how much you love what you're doing. And that has always resonated with the time that I've spent with you. Um, I want to ask you, the last interview I did with Myrna Valerio, we talked about how she doesn't introduce herself with her job title. She introduces herself with her values. And I really like that. And I know that you have defined this segment of your career to really strongly, you've always lived by your values. Like I know that from you, but you've designed your life and now your profession and your team and your foundation to, and all the partners that you work with, to strongly align with your values. And so I'm curious if you're able to
Yeah.
articulate and introduce yourself instead of Kate Courtney, Olympic mountain biker, world champion. If you can introduce yourself with your values for us or articulate.
Yeah, I will do my best. I haven't thought about it too much. So I'll give a go at it. Yeah, I think for me, one of the big pieces that I wanted to channel into this next chapter of my career with She Sense Racing is to be able to communicate those values through what I do, through my racing, through my partnerships, and through the way that we give back and pay it forward to the next generation. I think for me, those values really come down, if I had to give it one kind of theme, it would be going for it, like sending it,
Yeah.
following curiosity, following connection and compassion, and really commitment to what you want to achieve and how you want to achieve it. So I think this period of my career is really about communicating those values and also developing them. I think the best way that we learn about ourselves and we learn about what matters to us and we deepen that sense of self and that sense of values is through doing really, really hard things. And at this stage of my career, that is on the bike and in these races and trying to pursue that at the very top level. But I think you also come to a point in your career where you know I won't be doing this forever. And I also know even within that, it won't look like this forever. Like I want to find a way to keep these values and that intention intact in a way that serves me for the rest of my life, not just for the short period of my high performance athletic career.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that's the key to longevity in any career is that you stay core to your values, but the path or how it looks might, you might be doing a different thing that is expressing your values, but your values are still your values. And so,
Mhm.
I assume you'll be sending it, for a long time, whether it's hucking off mountain bike jumps or empowering other girls to get on bikes. Do you want to talk a little bit,
Yeah.
because you chose the name She Sends. It's very intentional, and it's the
Yeah.
name of your team. It's the name of your foundation. Where did that spark come from of like that spirit of going for it, and then how did that build into a foundation?
Yeah, I think first we'll start with what send is, because I'm sure there are many people who are in your audience that don't necessarily connect with that word. But in mountain biking and rock climbing and a few other action and adventure sports, this idea of sending it is about going for it. And I always use the idea of like pre-riding a World Cup mountain bike course, right? Like there's a technical feature. You pull up to it, you look at it, you watch someone go off it, you think about whether or not you have the skills to do it, you visualize yourself doing it. And then at a certain point, you have to hike back up the hill and
Mm,
let go of the brakes and go. And like that to me is the send it moment. It's the moment when, after assessing a challenge, after being pulled by the curiosity and the interest in doing something, and then trusting that you have these skills, you're willing to like risk uncertainty and go for it. And I think that's an incredibly important thing to living a really full life. And it's not just about, the positive side of achieving success and pushing your limits. It's also about contending with fear and uncertainty and things not working out. And what do we do when we face failure? And I really believe that it's in like pushing those edges that we get to the good stuff. So that was kind of the core idea
yeah.
that I wanted to communicate. And I also felt that it's something that really connects to the message I want to send to young women and girls. I think cycling's an amazing sport to explore that theme and to contend with that moment of send and
Yeah.
reaching beyond your limits. But I also think that in our worlds, like there are more opportunities for women now. There are these expanded possibilities and the ability to take that risk and go for it, even in a world where maybe we also have more critics and more feedback and more insecurity around some of those things. Like that was really the message that I wanted to send to those young girls, not just on the bike, but in living their lives and being willing to bet on themselves on and off the bike.
I mean, the bike, I mean, sport as well. I align with you on this, and it's sort of
Yeah.
what I preach and teach as well, is that sports are such a great training ground for life, to develop falling down, getting up, fear, teamwork, finding your community, especially, and setting goals. And there's so much wrapped into being an athlete at any level that is hopefully accessible to a lot more people because of you.
Thank you. Yeah, I've really been thinking about this idea that everything is training
Hmm.
at the moment. I think we talked about it before we started recording, but I'm racing Leadville, and that event has some really unique demands mentally and physically. And I think it's so different from what I normally do that it's put me in this mindset where I'm appreciating how everything can be used to strengthen what you need to meet that challenge. So a good example is even on an endurance ride, like I will have to be racing for 7 hours, which I've never done. So practicing focus, practicing staying really present for a 5 hour endurance ride. Suddenly, something that is a really simple and honestly at times pretty boring training ride, like we do that a lot, becomes really focused, an opportunity to strengthen a mindset or a physical skill or hone focus in order to meet a certain challenge. And that's a very clear like training example for a race, but when we zoom out, like meeting challenges within hard athletic events is training to better meet the challenges that maybe we don't have control over in life.
So let's take that into the development of your own team, taking the lessons of sending it into shifting from how you've raced your entire career on a factory team or a pro team or a USA Cycling, basically working for someone instead of being an entrepreneur. And this word privateer never existed really until recently in cycling. And in
Yeah.
cycling, most athletes are with a team. In a lot of the sports that I do, or the type of cycling, rock climbing, whatever, kayaking, this is not a new concept to basically work for
Exactly.
yourself and have to be an entrepreneur and have to do everything yourself. That's kind of how a lot of outdoor athletes have been, but cycling's pretty structured and developed. And so most of your career, you've been on a team, and you've just this year made a shift to be your own team and to develop your own team and be an entrepreneur and run your own business and run your own brand. Instead of working for someone else, you're working for yourself. So how did that like risk shift, the lessons you take from racing,
Yeah.
like, how do you bring that into doing something really scary that really not too many people in cycling have done before?
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I love the way that you presented that because it is not a new concept. In so many sports and sports that you've participated in, like that's the normal model, right? Like athletes attract individual sponsorships and manage their own media and racing and race support and travel. I think in, for example, like the lifetime Grand Prix in gravel racing, that is the model. In triathlon, that is the model.
Mhm.
In sports, for example, we talked about the Tour de Femme. Like in World Tour racing, you could never do that. There's too many race days. It requires a team.
Yeah.
There's too much logistics involved. Like you really do need to work for and race for one of those big teams, right?
Right.
Mountain biking is weirdly in the middle,
Mhm.
where in some ways there are huge benefits to being on a factory team. it's
Yeah.
set up for you. There is support, equipment's managed, travel and logistics are managed, staffing is managed, and a lot of the sponsors come along in that package deal. But there's also benefit and freedom to doing it a little bit differently. And I think for me, initially, I had the thought that I was ready for an environment change and was really curious about the ability to kind of control that environment in this next phase of my career. But to be honest, the thing that made me actually take on that work was the connection to the foundation. I think
Yeah.
for me, in this last phase of my career, the last, 5 or 6 years, one of the things that has been most gratifying is connecting with young riders and being able to inspire them and pave like new opportunities for them and really see the expansion of women's cycling in the US. And
Yeah.
that is what has been most exciting and kind of like tugged at my heart. And so when I felt that there might be an opportunity, not just to set up this race environment that is geared towards my full send period, right? Like this is going to be this chunk of my career where I'm really going for it. Um, I know that I'm not going to race for another 10 years. So
Yeah.
this period, I want to go all in and I want to be able to be the master of my own destiny in that way. And at the same time, I could bring in a group of sponsors that really believed in the value of sport in the way that I do and who really believe in this mission to get more women and girls on bikes, and to have it be connected and to have, the wins and the losses both like communicate value to this group, and to this mission. And I really, that was kind of what motivated me to take on this work, which I probably underestimated at the time.
It's a lot of work, but basically, I mean, you've actually kind of expanded your team. It's not a team of soigneurs and travel agents and, somebody handling logistics, but it's a team of people, all these girls that you're helping empower and your partners and those companies that believe in you. It's like this team of like boosting you up like a tailwind and people who care about what you're doing and not only care about what place you get, but how you show up and how you represent yourself and cycling. And so, in some ways, you've expanded your team in a really cool way.
That's a really good way to look at it. And I
And
absolutely feel
energetic.
that way.
Yeah,
Yeah,
maybe they're not doing all the work, but they're energizing you in a way that is so powerful to,
mhm.
know that like, I mean, I'm thinking about when I rode my bike up and down Kilimanjaro with the mission to do the climb, and ride the climb but the secondary mission, which actually was really a primary, was to raise money for World Bicycle Relief. And
Yeah.
when we got down, I knew we were going to go visit the school and gift the bikes to the girls. And like, I remember on summit day, like I was being pushed by these people I never met because I wanted to get to the summit for them so that they would have this example when they got their bikes to be like, oh my gosh, yes. So you're getting
Yeah.
this big team boost that I predict is going to be so powerful for you.
I think so. And I think what you've also just described is really that like intrinsic motivation.
Hmm.
That's a project, an idea, and a connection and a mission that kind of only you could have come up with and been driven by and set up and then found real motivation and meaning in. And I think that's the definition of sending it is like finding that for yourself. And so for me, this new project has really brought that. And I do think like the entrepreneurial side of setting this up has been building a new skill set
Yeah.
and in many ways like running an experiment. And I think that mindset is a mindset that can be really helpful in racing as well.
Yeah.
When you don't expect to know exactly how things are going to go, when you're open to opportunities that present themselves, when you're willing to do the work and learn and make mistakes and grow, and follow curiosity, like all of these lessons really apply back to bike racing. But for me, sometimes it's really helpful to have these other pursuits that get me outside of that narrow world of high performance, for periods of time.
Yeah, it can get really narrow if you're, like I said, it's quite you have to be super focused to compete at the level that you're competing at, but the rest of the hours of your day,
Yeah.
um, hopefully this is fueling something else. Um,
Yeah.
I'm it makes yeah, go ahead. What were you gonna
Oh,
say?
I was just gonna say, I think that's also a piece of like getting to know yourself as an athlete. And many of the athletes that I know in, at this level in sport, like have gone through periods where you kind of like get more narrow and then you expand your perspective again. And I do think we all have to like go through that journey for ourselves. And I think of it as like when you're really trying to reach the top, you're adding things in, you're adding things in. And then eventually, like when you reach this point of more like mastery and command in the sport, you're able to like see what is really necessary and what really serves not just your athletic pursuits, but like you as a person and you in achieving your best. And I actually, my coach, Barry Austin, was the one who kind of planted the seeds for this new program and this different way of doing things. And one of the things that he brought up was like, you do better when you have a creative project and when you
Yeah.
have something going on outside of cycling. And I'm not worried about you not being focused enough or not getting your training done. Like you will do those things, but I tend to be, skewed towards being too narrow and like too restricted and focused and limited in those ways. And sometimes for me personally, like getting the best out of myself actually looks like having a bit more going on and having
Yeah.
a bit of an outlet outside of riding. And that might not work for everyone. That might not be everyone's journey or best setup. Like some people do a lot better when they have like more quiet and calm and like just focus on the training or everyone's different, but I think figuring out what works for you and then being willing to do that, no matter what other people might think of it, is a hard skill, but has really helped me in this phase.
Well, and you're learning and evolving through it. I mean, when you started racing, you were in Stanford, you were a student, you were packing it all in, and then you graduated, and then you got to really focus on your sport 1,000,000%. And that
Yep.
went great sometimes and didn't go great sometimes. And then you got married and now you're starting a business and you're, privateering and she sends and I think you're sort of finding the flow of, you're a super productive person and that you want to have other things going on. But I love that
Yeah.
you're able to reflect on that and think about it. I mean, you've always been to me, you've seemed like a really sort of philosophical, you have a mindful approach to things, you read a lot and you think a lot. I know that you're really cerebral kind of person and
It's a gift and a curse.
it's like of course, like everything. There's two sides of things, but I've really been enjoying your Substack, your Monday mantras that you send out because they're real life snapshots of you sitting down to reflect on what's going on for the week and the way that you structured. I love it because it's like what you're thinking about, a mantra, a quote that's maybe yours or somebody else's, and then a takeaway for the rest of us. And they're short, quick reads. But I really like the way that you've structured those. Like we talked about, I feel like sports are life lessons, and you're kind of like condensing those down every Monday into some really cool little mantras, basically. Where did the idea of that come from? When did you start doing that?
Yeah. I started it this spring, and actually when I was in South Africa racing, the Tonka track early this season and on a big training camp with my coach, I was reflecting on the fact that I really do enjoy writing. I think it's, a lot of how I get clarity and how I think through things and, also, like, mark these periods of time where you're thinking about things in a certain way. And I was trying to think of a way to get myself to write a bit more. And this format kind of occurred to me while I was on a ride because I often have a mantra around a specific race or even within a specific training block. And I thought, oh, maybe that could be a jumping off point for summarizing, what I'm thinking about at a
Yeah.
given period of time or what I'm learning from a given experience. And so I started doing it, basically thinking that just my mom would read it. And it's pretty much still my mom. But I found that I really enjoy the practice. And similar to how a race structures your training, like having a date on the calendar when you need to press send on something,
Mhm.
it's forces you to really like think about these things and get it done and write it and reflect on it. And I think I needed that structure to really, inspire a bit more of that practice in my life.
It's so true. It's like I've been dabbling with writing too, and some art and some other stuff that I picked up during my concussion recovery. And I haven't been, I need a structure because, like, as an athlete, it's like you sort of need a deadline and you sort of need, whereas I'm like, oh, maybe I'll write something today. That doesn't really work for me either. I'm finding I'm not producing what I would like to be doing.
Yeah.
So, yeah,
I mean, that I think it's that way for everyone.
yeah,
I always say that people underestimate structure and overestimate discipline.
yeah,
And as elite athletes, like no one ever questions my discipline, right? Because it's built into your job.
yeah,
But I actually think elite athletes, and it sounds like you do as well, like really rely on structure. It's really about having a plan, having dates on the calendar, having these like actionable items that you check off and you
yeah.
do that are planned. One of the best examples I use is always strength training. I actually love strength training, and
Mm,
it's been a huge part of my preparation since the very beginning because it just makes me feel better on the bike and it makes me feel stronger. But during the pandemic, I was doing all of my strength training in the garage and I just hated it. And I was like checking my phone and like doing laundry. And it's like, my house is right there. I'm like hearing things happening inside. I was just distracted and it didn't feel high performance and it didn't feel effective. And I was able, actually, coming out of the pandemic, to start training in person with my trainer. And so he said, I can come and do it at your house. And I said, no, like I want to have to be somewhere at
mhm,
a time and do it.
yeah,
And so we started working out together twice a week. I would get there at 9 a.m. and start my workout. And
yeah,
suddenly, like my performance was better. I couldn't wait to go to the gym. I like loved being there. It felt like I was just like hanging out with my friend and doing this awesome workout. And then I'd leave and feel so good about myself.
yeah,
And both of those things are doing my job, and one required immense willpower, right? I'm in the garage, like fighting the urge to be
yeah.
distracted and forcing myself to do something. And one just required me to get in the car and be there at 9 a.m. And I think that I've really tried to apply that to other places
Yeah.
in my life where with the right structure, things become really easy and you can just build a system around it that not only makes it possible for you to stay on track, but actually really enjoyable.
Yeah, it's one of the hardest shifts that for me of being not being a competitive athlete anymore is sort of like, what should I do today? And being an entrepreneur, you've got to put that own structure in yourself, and it's hard to do alone. You do need people
It's
and
so hard.
friends and events to
Yeah.
show up to that are a date on a calendar, even if it doesn't matter if you're first or last. Like, yeah, that is something that I'm really trying to bring into this chapter of my life of like, oh, that athlete
Yeah.
structure, I'm kind of missing it
It's
because
pretty funny. Like when you see people just doing intervals just because, I'm like, wow, you're mentally stronger than me. I think, we have these like really specific goals that structure this really specific program. And going hard within that is a different mental challenge than just kind of like generally doing it. And I think that's why having goals is so helpful
yeah,
for everyone, whether or not it's like your main pursuit or your profession. Like just having that goal to kind of structure your efforts, it's like the peak of the mountain that builds
yeah.
the sides, right?
Yeah.
And I'm sure it plays an even bigger role when obviously you're still like so passionate about riding and pushing yourself, but now have to kind of be the master of your own destiny with structuring that.
Well, I've just put some things on the calendar for the first time in a few years, so I'm excited about that. So,
That's
um,
very exciting.
yeah, which is like, oh, I better get out and train because I'm going to do this really cool adventure in Morocco in February. So
Oh, that's amazing. That'll be awesome.
it will be, but I'm like,
Yeah.
okay, I got some work to do, but that's definitely a motivator.
I
Yeah.
mean, I'll say in a weird way, like one of the gifts of this broken wrist and little season change is that Leadville to me feels like setting that type of a goal, right? I
Yeah.
said, I almost feel like an amateur approaching it where you think, oh, this is this bucket list item. Oh, it fits in my calendar. Okay, now this is structuring my training and how I'm thinking about things and setting up my equipment. And
Mhm.
that really is how racing should always be. But I think once you get so far down the road and having focused on something for a long time, you forget that that is really what challenges are supposed to feel like. And what
Yeah.
they're supposed to bring to your everyday life is they bring this structure and this desire to push in order to be mentally, physically, spiritually prepared to take on this big feat.
Yeah, and I mean, you and I both can maybe relate in a different way, but when it becomes so focused, so structured, and I'll admit I lost some of the joy for sure in my racing,
Yeah.
and now I'm going back to adventuring, which is like then remembering like, oh yeah, I love to adventure on my bike, and the way you're describing it sounds like you as a young racer being like, I don't really know what's going to happen. I'm doing a new thing. I would love to get into the injury because you wrote about it in your Monday mantra, and get into kind of because it's a shift in your career and this or in this season that isn't
Yeah.
going as planned. You had your World Cup schedule, it's all lined out. You're going to go, exactly where you're going to be at every single date, and then you get an injury. So, do you want to go into that Monday mantra, or well, the one you wrote was to make it an advantage, and you talked about setbacks and your injury, and do you want to dive into
Yeah.
the speed on that? And I mean, feel free to tell us what happened, but I'm more interested in, I mean, everyone gets injured, I'm more
Yeah.
interested in the shift for you and the mindset. And now you found a new adventure and a new training goal.
I think, yeah, this case was definitely, it was the injury, but I think in general, this mindset applies to when things just don't go as you expected or as you planned, which
Right.
happens all the time. That
Yeah.
is a huge part of life. And I think as racers, like one of the ways that I've thought about those things in the past is, okay, here's the ideal plan. Here's the detour that we're on. How quickly can I get back to where I'm supposed to be? Right?
Mhm.
How quickly can I get back to the World Cup circuit? How fast can I get back to a place where it's like this never happened?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And that mindset's really limiting because it starts at a deficit. You're already feeling off track and you're trying to get back on track. And that mindset just has never worked really well for me. And I
Mhm.
think because of the timing of this injury, it happened with 3 World Cups and national championships within the period that I would be out. So it takes about 8 weeks after getting a screw put in to your scaphoid to be able to really race.
Mhm.
And those events fell within that period. And then because of the Tour de France and our summer break, the next World Cup was end of August. So I
Mhm.
had this like built in big break in the season.
Yeah.
And it just kind of like forced me to think differently about it. And rather than pushing the timeline and trying to be back racing a World Cup at 6 weeks post surgery, which probably could have been possible. Like the bone probably wouldn't break from riding your bike at that time, but would that have been the best preparation? No. Would that have been a huge risk? Yes. Would I have
Mhm.
been in shape for that event? No. Would
Yeah.
that have been a good mental setup? Absolutely not. And so instead, I thought, okay, how can I like reinvent this path altogether? Like, what would be a totally different approach to the
Mhm.
second half of the season, given what's happened?
Mhm.
And it occurred to me that, with this timeline, it would be close, but I would be back in time for Leadville, which has been like a bucket list event for me forever. It's just such a cool US historic mountain bike event. It's really hard.
Yeah.
And I just have always been curious about what racing it would be like, but it also requires preparation and being in altitude and is really not compatible with the World Cup season.
Oof.
So I took the opportunity to do that. And then I restructured a little bit my end of season. I will have 4 World Cups remaining starting in August. So, really, still half the season,
Yeah.
basically.
Yeah.
And I am going to race Marathon Worlds as well. So, I'll race Marathon Worlds and Cross Country Worlds, both in Switzerland, a week apart. So, suddenly, like, Leadville becomes a bit of preparation for these longer events.
Mhm.
And what I've already found is that my body responds really well to this type of training. And I remember experiencing that when I did the Cape Epic really early in my career, that I do really well with volume and I really like these endurance events.
Mhm.
But they felt too far out of my lane to put into a cross country season. And this has kind of forced me to do that. And we're already learning a lot about my body and my training and building mental strength. Like these types of events are an amazing opportunity to really focus on those inflection points where it's really uncomfortable and you do not want to keep going and you have to for 7 hours. So yeah, I think there's a lot of really amazing silver linings that are coming out of it that also don't depend on the race going perfectly. And I think that has been a very freeing mindset and something that makes me really excited to race for the rest of the season.
Do you feel like, well, and for people listening, if you don't know, the Leadville 100 mountain bike race, it is an iconic the most iconic US mountain bike race. But it's 100 miles or 103 miles to be exact. Don't forget, there's an extra 3 miles.
I
Um,
think, yeah, they said it's 105 now. I
okay,
was
now
like,
it's 105.
okay,
Okay, yeah, because
we're
you see your mileage ticking up. You're like, great, I'm at 91, I'm at 99, and then I remember the first time I did it, I'm like, I'm at 100. I'm not at the finish yet. So yeah, it's
amazing.
but anyway, it's a really long event. It starts at 10,000 feet, and so compared to the type of racing that you're doing for an hour and a half, and it's not super technical, but it's this endurance night, not in, it's a really endurance
Yeah.
challenge. It's not a nightmare. It's actually a really beautiful, cool race.
Yeah.
And it was a turning point in my cycling career to win Leadville. Was all of a sudden people were like, who's this person? And like
Yeah.
we talked about
When
before,
was your first Leadville?
first Leadville was 2009. So I won 9, 10, yeah, 9, 10, 11, 12. I think were
No
my
big deal.
winning years.
Yeah.
But yeah, I was like you. I had come from 24-hour racing, so also totally different, but on a different spectrum than you. And I'm like, 7 hours is so short. Like the record was 8. And I'm
We're
like,
coming at it from different mindsets, Rebecca.
totally.
I'm
And I was
like,
like, it's so
this
short,
is
it's
an
a sprint.
eternity.
And you're like, I have to focus for 7 hours. How am I going to not
Yeah.
fall asleep?
So
But
long. Yeah.
it it is a different event, but I remember some Ina Yoko Teutenberg was racing one of the years, and she had come right off the Olympics, road racer, really
Wow.
decorated, beautiful, amazing Olympic road racer. And she rode it, and she was said it was harder than the Olympics because it's basically like a time trial, for 7 hours,
Yeah.
where you're full gas at altitude. And so,
Yeah. Well, I think that's like what makes it such an interesting event. I raced a stage race, and I will say that if I had not raced a stage race, I would have absolutely no chance of a good ride at
yeah,
the main race,
yeah,
because it is so specific. And I think that's what's really interesting is we have people coming from World Tour road racing. You have people that are focused on gravel. You have now mountain bikers. You have lifetime Grand Prix athletes that have maybe focused on this event specifically in the past. There's really some kind of like specialist knowledge, and it requires this interesting mix of skill sets where there's a number of athletes who can have amazing rides out there who have very different skill sets and who
yeah,
have to utilize those strengths. And I think for me, having that kind of like diversity in the challenge is really important and really useful. And I think I did that a lot more early in my career. Like I
yeah,
raced local road or local gravel, or I raced Cape Epic. I did these events that were meant to challenge me in different ways. And
yeah,
I always took a lot out of those events, whether it was physically learning something that, oh, this is a weakness that I can develop, or mentally seeing that I was capable of more than I thought, or pushing through those hard moments. I mean, I remember in Cape Epic, my takeaway, I had this moment when I got a flat and I was like, nobody's coming. Like, no, like the race is going. I'm fixing this flat. And if I want to catch up, there's no like timeout. Like, I just
yeah,
have to catch up, right? And it's a 5-hour race in the desert, and we did. And like those moments maybe don't seem like they relate as much to cross country racing. They're not on that narrow path. They're not VO2 efforts necessarily. Um, but they build this skill set that helps you in your primary pursuit.
Yeah, it makes me think about all athletes. I've done a lot of different sports in my career, and I think that's why I've had such longevity. Is even
Yeah.
within cycling, doing lots of different disciplines, and it's different than your racing World Cup with a very specific thing. But it's kind of a gift that you're able to sprinkle some of these things in. And I know you run as well, and I know a lot of
Yeah.
um, mountain bikers ski and do other things. I think it's really healthy for the body and the mind, for people at any age who are to do different sports. I just think that there's a lot of learning in all of that. So I want to know, you did the stage race, you had really tight racing with Melissa Rollins,
Yeah.
which
That's
super
awesome.
exciting to watch. What are you, and when this airs, you will have completed your first
Crazy.
Leadville, and we'll be excitedly looking at the results. But what are you excited about, or what are you? I mean, I can hear the energy that you're like, "Ooh, this is something different," and I don't know all the people, and I don't totally know the course. Like, you seem to be thriving on the unknown a little bit of it.
That's a really good way of putting it. And I've been thinking a lot about the idea that uncertainty and freedom are kind of two sides of the same coin, right? Like this freedom and possibility also comes from not really knowing.
Yeah.
And that is a real gift in this race. And I think it's forcing me to be really focused in my preparation and be really dialed in knowing what my plan is, and having a good plan, not necessarily to like compete with the other athletes, but to really accomplish the course in the fastest possible time, right? Because that's the subtext of Leadville. And I think one of the things that makes it really unique and cool is that there are racing dynamics. It is going to be, in my opinion, the most competitive women's field they've ever seen. But it's also about how fast you can ride that terrain, how well you can manage those tough descents, how well you can eat and drink and stay focused and keep pedaling, and accomplish all of these things. And so for me, my preparation has really been about identifying those things, coming up with ways that I will implement them, whether that's like having a really good fueling plan,
Mhm.
having some good kind of check ins on pacing. I think altitude is really feel based, and you can't really use numbers in the same way, but I do think you can use them in some ways that are useful. So, working with a coach on that. And then I think mentally preparing for it to just be a really hard challenge and connecting with the fact that my real goal is to just like get the best out of myself on this course. And that is possible on any given race day.
So you mentioned, I want to know metrics. What kind of metrics are, because you mentioned it about Leadville specifically, like obviously your power, like some of the metrics go out the window above 10,000 feet. And
They
so
do, yeah.
they shift and they change. But I'm curious what kind of metrics you're using for, what is defining a win, what metrics you're using in training, what metrics you're using in She Sends and with the business development. And I ask this because for a while I had to stop using my power meter. I had to stop
Mm.
using certain metrics that I really love and rely on and find some different ones and then bring some of the other metrics back in because my mind was in a different place and some of the metrics were demotivating instead of motivating, and they were not informing me, they were actually holding me back. So I'm curious about your metrics right now.
Yeah, it sounds really cliche, but truly success for me at Leadville will be giving my best for 7 hours.
Yeah,
Um,
great.
Hopefully around there, but we'll see. That would be really fast.
Yeah.
But like giving my best for that entire race, I think is a huge. It requires a complex skill, right? That's like pacing the effort well, fueling well, staying really focused, getting through those hard moments mentally, using the group well. Like all of these skills are things that I want to practice. And I think yeah, because it is this kind of like fun personal challenge, like that can actually really be my goal. Like I want to go as fast as I can.
Yeah.
Um, and anything can happen, right?
Mhm.
Like crashes, flats, mistakes, someone's really strong. Like you
Yeah.
don't know what's going to happen. The group dynamics are different than you expected. But when you have goals like that, you can always come back to them, and find a way to do that in any given moment in the race. So that is like the kind of overarching feeling. I would say in terms of metrics for this event, one of the things you find is, yeah, your power numbers are just going to be really different at this elevation, which is part of why I did the stage race, was to like
Yeah.
really combine that feel and those metrics. So for me as an athlete, when I'm at my best, it's when I'm extremely in touch with that feel
Yeah.
and with what it feels like to be at threshold, and like what my breathing is like at threshold, what my legs feel like at threshold. And then connecting that a bit with some data. So if I can really feel that, often you end up in a pretty steady zone. And then, okay, generally speaking, this is what I'm able to do. And this is what I'm going to have as my like base plan. And so we always have kind of a base plan that's like the safety zone plan. And then the racer in me takes care of going above that plan, which always happens and is part of racing. But when you have that like general idea of, okay, it's an hour climb. Like I know if I'm doing it 30 watts above what feels like threshold, I'm not going to be able to do that for an hour. Right.
Yeah.
And so even just having those metrics available in some way, like if you end up alone or if you're in a big group, like that actually I think is a skill to be able to use those fluidly and adjust them as the race goes on, and not get attached to it, but to have, for me, it's usually like a governor, right? Like
Yeah.
my tendency as a cross country athlete coming to this
Yeah.
event will be to start too hard. And that might feel good at the beginning of the hour climb, but
Yeah.
that that's unsustainable. And so sometimes just like having this mix of feel and some
Mhm.
indicators is my best path to success.
Yeah, I mean, that's maturity as an athlete, having all of those feeling, subjective and objective measures, and then responding in the moment, to whatever's going on. I want to go back to one of your Monday mantras that was talking about Leadville, and you talked about, you called it risk curiosity. And you had this cool quote. It was like, what if I could, and that curiosity has guided my career a lot of great things. If you're like, it's a high, I mean, it's proven, Stephen Kotler, who does a lot of research, Flow Research Collective, curiosity is one of the highest motivating factors we can have. And so when people are like, well, I've chosen like races like this one in Morocco I'm going to do, I'm like, what's Morocco like? Or could I do it? Could I do another multi-day stage race? So curiosity is like a super powerful motivator. But the
Yeah.
quote that you put, I want to read, because there's some things that we need in order to be able to be curious. And so this is from E. E. Cummings, and it says, once we believe in ourselves, we can risk curiosity, spontaneous delight, or any experience that reveals the human spirit, which is amazing. But the first part of it is, once we believe in ourselves, we can. And so belief has to come first. And so what if we don't believe in ourselves? And if you've lost belief in yourself, or a time where, like, how can you take what you've learned from maybe a time you've lost belief, and how do we bring ourselves into that place where we do believe, and where we can risk, and we can be curious, and we can be a true, like, shining version of ourselves? But first we have to
Yeah.
believe.
Yeah, it's an interesting concept. And I think it's become equated with like believing in a goal in
Mhm.
our modern world. Like I think you get this sense that as an elite athlete, like if you want to achieve something, it's from the age of 3, you have to be believing you're going to win this gold medal and targeting that, right? And that is belief in something external that you don't have control over, right? That is not believing in yourself. And I think when we're able to believe that we have the capacity to give our best, no matter the circumstances, and to learn from an event and
Mhm.
get better for the next event, that is what gives you this kind of feeling that the outcome is secondary, which is so cliche and we talk about all the time in sports. But I think it's something that I have had to learn and relearn and relearn and relearn in my career, because you do really care about these outcomes. You
Yeah.
care about the race. Like if I didn't care about the potential of having a really good race or having a really good result, like I wouldn't be driven in the same way to do the really, really hard work that's required to show up ready to compete at these events. But ultimately, the goal is to have that kind of like belief in your ability to continue to evolve and get better. And I think for me, this Leadville race has actually been a really good opportunity to think through that, and to allow myself to be focused on this version of success that feels really different than I must get UCI points,
Mhm.
get this certain world ranking to get this start position to get on a World Cup podium, right? I think that's been my definition of success for quite a long time. And increasingly, I've like narrowed what it is that I have to do to achieve that.
Yeah.
And really, that's that kind of outcome focus. That's a belief that if I just believe enough in this goal, I'll be able to achieve it. Versus believing enough in myself that I will be able to take advantage of any opportunity and to be able to achieve a version of success that is, maybe unexpected, right? I think I will give you a good example. Like the year that I won world championships, my focus was getting on a World Cup podium. It was my first year elite. I raced Cape Epic, and the whole year, my whole focus was getting on a World Cup podium. And I did not achieve that goal. I got really close. I was like in third in the last lap and flatted and then lost sprint for fifth. I had
Yeah.
a race where like I was in the lead group till halfway and then blew up, right? I had all these times where I was very close, and that was a goal that I had set for myself and other people probably weren't really paying attention to, but I didn't achieve it.
Yeah.
And instead, at the end of the year, I ended up winning a world championship, like after feeling that I had not achieved what I wanted that season,
Yeah.
right? And so I think it just gives you this more open sense of if I show up, if I believe in myself, if I give my best, if I learn from every mistake that I make and I use it to get better for the next time. If it's not this time, it's next time, right? If it's not this goal, it's the next one. And that's what keeps you like on that send path, on that in that send it mindset is being able to know that you will get it right eventually.
Have you had times where you've lost belief in yourself?
I don't know if I would put it that way. I just think there have been times where I focus too much on that external outcome. And you're
Mhm.
like believing in the goal more than you're believing in the process.
Yeah.
Um and and for me, I think that cuts me off from all of the like superpowers you have in the moment, right? Because what actually gets you there is those hard moments where, oh, you like really, you're not sure you can hang on and you do 30 more seconds. You say, I'm gonna hang on to the group till this next tree. Oh, I'm gonna eat a gel. Wow, I feel much better. Now I'm back in it, right? Like those moments don't necessarily feel like success, but they are the tiny, tiny stepping stones that
Mhm.
get you to these big inflection points where you're able to reach your goal. And I think um, one of the challenges of like reaching a certain level of success that you've been aiming for is then that becomes the expectation. And I
Mhm.
don't just mean that as the expectation from others, I mean that as the expectation from yourself.
Yeah.
And so the expectation that it should be easy for you or you should be able to do it, that's not really self belief. That actually really undermines it. And so that's definitely something that I've had to kind of untrain in my career.
Mhm. Yeah, I saw something today that was like, we often don't recognize our success, because we keep elevating our expectation because we achieve and then we expect more and we expect more and we expect more. And, even watching the Tour de France Femme, when Pauline Ferrand-Prévot rode away on the Madeleine, and initially, Demi Vollering, she was disappointed, and Kasia Niewiadoma is disappointed. And then they said later, when they looked at their own stats and their numbers, they're like, wow, I had a great climb. I did my best. And so she was just better that day. And that was interesting to hear that the reflection after the placing, yes, of course, they were disappointed. They were all vying for the win. But then when they looked at it, they're like, oh, I had a good day.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Absolutely. And I mean, that racing was so
it was
exciting and
so
amazing. And I
exciting.
think to me, it outlines that there's negotiables and there's non-negotiables.
Mhm.
And the non-negotiable is giving your best. You will always be proud and happy with your effort if you really do hold that edge. And the tricky thing about that is that only you can really assess that. Only
Yeah.
you can know if you backed off that edge, if you didn't give everything you had, right? That's a very subjective thing. But for me in my career, like that feels like the non negotiable. I think the negotiable is how that manifests into a result because it might not happen at the race you think. It might not happen in the way you think. There
Mhm.
might be someone, you might get to that event that you've been targeting. Every woman who is in that race, like, is, well, actually, in the Tour de France, people work together as a team, but there are many women who had set that goal and worked really hard for an entire year to try to stand on the top of that podium, and only one does. And
Yeah.
so, if that's the only metric of success, that's a pretty challenging environment to be in. And I think it actually works against giving your best, where if you're focusing on just that non-negotiable, on just that effort, there's many different versions of what success will look and feel like.
I love that non-negotiable is giving your best, and I'll add a layer to it. It's giving your best of where you are right now. And like for me, giving my best, my power numbers or my whatever isn't what it was, 3 years ago or whatever, but you can give your best today, and from wherever you're starting from. And so I think that is something that I'm going to take from this conversation.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Because I've struggled with that. So I really appreciate that insight of the non-negotiable metric. Um, what I've got two more questions. One,
Okay.
what does you like to you have sort of a way of setting your goals of like bronze, silver, gold, like levels.
Yeah.
I'm curious with She Sends and Foundation and She Sends team. What does success kind of look like? What is the sort of year, this first year really of the
Yeah.
team, not the first year of the foundation, but what are your hopes and dreams for what success looks like in those areas?
Yeah, it's been a really exciting year at the foundation. And I think it's a good opportunity to reflect mid year on the fact that we've reached a lot of those big goals. And for me, one of the things I wanted to focus on this year was having one big project in each of our kind of pillars. So we have diversity, development, and dominance. And we have not necessarily, like in the past, our biggest partnership has been in the development category with NICA GRIP program, getting more high school girls on bikes and trying to get that percentage of female participation up for high school racing. But this year we're doing a diversity focused project with Little Bellas, that's getting girls exposed to cycling in an inner city bike program. And on the dominant side, we actually partnered with Strava to give direct grants to U23 racers. And so seeing all of those projects start to come to life, and those are kind of our three biggest ones this year, but we've had quite a few other smaller collaborations and events, has been really, really rewarding. And I think is a good kind of proof of concept that we're starting to reach those goals. I would say the other side, on the more business side, running a foundation, as you know, Rebecca, and have given me advice on many times, it's much more of an operation than it necessarily seems like going in. So some of the things that people might not see but are happening behind the scenes, are things like really dialing in your accounting, really dialing in your systems. We brought on Vanessa Hoswald, who is an incredible friend of us both, and who is helping really take the foundation to the next level in terms of organization and being ready to expand the level of support that we can give. And so all of those goals accumulate towards our eventual kind of mission.
Yeah. I mean, I love typical Kate style. You're building a structure, you're building a team, you've got, your pillars, you've got it organized. And
Yeah.
that's, like anything, that's the first work that needs to happen is to organize the structure of it and get the right people to help support the mission.
That's a good, yeah, you're kind of we're building the rocket ship at the
Yeah,
moment, which is
yeah,
honestly how I feel with the team side as well. I would say, um, probably in my mind, I was like, oh, I'm going to do all this stuff and then win all these races immediately.
yeah,
Right.
yeah,
And actually, I think at the early season, it was just a huge lift. It was a lot to get the team together, to get the new equipment, to get everything working well.
yeah.
And I was kind of tired in some of those early races, and I did not perform at my best. And that is another reason I think the universe sent me the not so subtle sign of the broken wrist and the forced rest around that. Um, but yeah, I think being willing to kind of invest in long-term success and play the long game with these types of things is really, really hard to do in practice. It like sounds great. But I'm hoping that, yeah, now we have some momentum on our side with both the racing and the mission foundation side.
Yeah, you've set everything up so beautifully. And
Oh, thank
I'm really impressed with how you've pivoted mid-season and doing some really cool
you.
stuff. I'm so excited I can't wait to see your how Leadville goes. I'll be totally watching. And I hope that while you're riding, those 7 hours or however 7 hours and 3 minutes or however long it takes, that you kind of think of some of the energy of all the girls and women that you're inspiring and let that push you up Columbine and power line and all those climbs and just, send it on a downhill like I know you will.
Honestly, yeah, it really does mean something to me, and it really does show up in my racing. And I'll give you one silly example. I'm sure you know the Leadville equipment setup is all the rage and very fun to get very nerdy on. And I have a raw carbon frame
Uh-huh.
that's a little bit lighter, and I
Yeah.
have the She Sends Sparkle paint job that says send on the top tube. And we're actually going to announce at Leadville that that frame will be available in that colorway. And Allied will be donating a pretty significant portion of the proceeds from that bike back to the foundation.
Oh,
So when I picked my bike, I was like, okay, I'm taking the weight penalty. I'm
yeah.
running. It's only a few. It's not that much. It's a
Right.
couple grams. We're fine.
Still.
But I actually thought about that. I was like, no, I really want to be on the She Sends colorway and representing this mission and riding a bike that gets more girls on bikes.
Well, that's just gonna like help you fly up the hills. Just look
I
down at
hope
the
so.
sparkles and give that extra motivation, knowing that it's about a lot more than what place you finish in Leadville or on any podium.
Absolutely.
All right.
Yeah.
So the last thing I want to end with, because this is called What's the Rush
Yeah.
podcast, it's about editing and stripping down and maybe taking a pause. In one of your Monday mantras, you titled "The Main Thing is the Main Thing." Let the rest go. You had a quote from Warren Buffett that is knowing what to leave out is just as important as knowing what to focus on. So, is there something that you're leaving out right now in your
Oh,
life?
that's a really good question. Yeah, I mean, I don't nothing specifically comes to mind at the
Okay.
moment, but I think in general, the kind of thought behind that for me was as an athlete, we feel there's all these things that we should do to be the perfect little athlete, for
Mhm.
me at least, right? It's should I be meditating and stretching and doing mobility and going and taking an ice bath and then doing heat training and then all of these things, right? And the reason I pulled that quote was because during my 2-week training camp in Tahoe, I really needed to get the volume back up, right? I had these 2 weeks off with the wrist surgery and 3 weeks on the trainer where I was riding 10 hours a week. And we had to do this volume. And I had these amazing rides, and many of them were 6 hours. And we had a few days where I had to move something else. Like I couldn't do strength one day and moved it to the next day, or um, yeah, just really was able to focus on that main thing and letting that be enough.
Yeah.
And I think what I found is often, I'll take mobility as a great example. Like my body will tell me
Hmm.
if I'm doing a good job or if I need to up my mobility a little bit. But if you're just doing all these things to check a box and quell your anxiety, really, um, they don't make a huge difference. And so I think the ability to like flexibly incorporate all of these tools that we have, but also to leave them out when they're unnecessary or when they're distracting from the main purpose can be huge. And sometimes what you do instead is rest, and that can be the most effective thing.
Yeah, rest, or spend time with your partner, or do some of the other things that
Yeah,
really do rejuvenate and lift us up in other ways emotionally.
completely. Yeah.
Well, I will, as you head off into Leadville, I'm going to use your grandpa's quote of "Give them
Oh, thank you.
hell," and I will also ask you to send it. And my mantra of "Be good" while you're out there, and we know you will. Thank you, Kate.
Thank you.
It's a long and dusty road and a hot and heavy load. Folks I meet ain't always kind. Some are bad, some are good, some have done the best they could. Some have tried to ease my troubling mind. And I can't help but wonder where I'm bound, where I'm bound. Can't help but wonder where I'm bound.